I just created a new database. I just called it database 34. And watch what I can do. I can import the definition of a database that already exists. This is a database that I had exported previously. And by doing this, as you can see, when we're finished, we have a complete duplicate of what we saw earlier. This is an earlier version of the database that I'd been working with for the CBT. So we have the capability to export what's in a database and then import that into another database. And this is great for, of course, moving it from a production system or from a staging system into a production system or vice versa, and also sharing individual elements. But there are some tricks to it, so let's go ahead and go over that. I'm going to go ahead and delete this current database and go back and take a look at the one I've been working with so far. Here's my database. In order to export this entire database, it doesn't matter where you're selected within this hierarchy here. It doesn't really matter where you selected. If you choose File and then Export, that's going to export the entire database. Now, that's the one way that you can do this where it doesn't matter what you've selected. If, on the other hand, you wanted to export just a single element and move that from one system to another, we would select the item that we want and do a right mouse click. And at that point, we can choose Export. And as you can tell by the name here, this is simply going to export the properties of that mixing tank. So again, if same place, I've selected the same thing. If I choose File, Export here, as you can see, just by the naming convention, you can see we're exporting the entire AF database at that point. Now let's go ahead and do some exports, and we'll explain some things along the way. Now, when I choose File, Export, I'm going to export everything. So a couple of the options that you see here aren't really going to be that useful. For example, include all referenced objects. That's really an option that's only useful if you decide that you're going to be exporting just singular elements. Like, for example, if I do a right click here and choose Export, it's just going to export the mixing tank. If I choose that, it's going to export the mixing tank plus the mixing tank template. Now remember, when I choose File, Export from here, we're going to export the whole database anyway, so we're going to be including all the referenced objects as well. As you might guess, if you choose the security settings, that's simply going to export all the security that's associated, all the different security options that are associated with your AF objects. And that will take longer. I suppose it would be something useful if you want to make an exact duplicate, including the security settings. But if you are moving this from one server to another, you can omit that. It would speed up the export and the import, and then you can set whatever security settings you want for the destination. Now, default values gives you a chance to export every single thing that's in this AF database, including those things that have not changed from the defaults that are established in the templates. Now, typically, that's going to swell the size of this AF export. It's exporting to this file here. It's going to swell the size of that without really adding much in terms of content, because when you import without the defaults, then we simply create those objects with the defaults. So, if you create an object that has a default value of 5, let me give you an example from here from our mixing tank. Now my mixing tank, if I take a look at the library for the mixing tank, that mixing tank has a default of 3 meters for the diameter, 5 meters for the height. In the case of mixing tank 1, I actually have a diameter of 4 meters, not 3 meters. So if you choose, whether you choose the default values or not, we are going to export the diameter because it's different than the default. Now, if we take a look at mixing tank 2, it has the default values for diameter and height. So if you choose to clear that field, if you leave that or uncheck that option, if you uncheck the default values option, then if you've left that unchecked, you will not see a value for diameter appear in that XML file. But that's actually okay, because when you import this, wherever you import this, as long as you are importing the element template, then we will put that default value in there. So what's the purpose of this if the effect is the same? Well, the purpose is if you would like to have an absolute record, including all of the defaults of what's in your system, you would choose that option. And that would ensure that everything, including default values, has been exported. For example, that would be very useful if you're taking this to some external system. You're going to use some transform file to bring this into some other system. You want the default values as well, because their default behavior may not be the same as ours. So, we want that option, but typically this is going to be something that you clear. You would clear this default values, clear that checkbox so that it keeps the file size small, so we don't export things that we really don't need. And finally, we have this unique IDs. What unique IDs allows you to do is specify that a unique identifier is associated with the object, and in that way you can change the name of the object, since the name is no longer going to be required for providing uniqueness. So you would only choose that option if you did want to do some kind of an export in which you're going to go through this exported file and by hand change those object names. So if you're really interested in doing some kind of a renaming that exploits doing this in a nice editor here, then you can do that and then specify unique IDs, and that gives you a mechanism to rename these things as you like. And finally, if you are making use of our event tracking using event frames, then you can export what those event cases are. So you just select here and specify how much you want to export. In this class, we're really not looking at event frames. We do have some learning labs from our user conferences in which you can take a look at event frames and how they work. And also from our vCampus learning labs, we have event frames examples if you're really interested in that. So I'm going to go ahead and do an export and just include all my referenced objects. Not really necessary because it's going to export the entire database in this case. I think what I'd like to do here is give this this is just my own preference, I'll give this a date. So right now it's the 10th year, the 10th month, the 11th day. So I'll just give it that name. And we've now exported that. And if we take a look at where I exported this, and this can just go to any place you choose to export. Yeah, there's my export. It's as of the current date, and I just gave it this unique name so that I'll remember what date this was from. So what's the benefit of that? Well, if I get things really messed up in here, I start making deletions that I regret. Okay, I've deleted that. I've accidentally deleted my some of my templates or my enumeration sets. Any of those things, if these things have been deleted, or in some other way I've made a mistake here, I can always go in and import this back. Now when I do an import, you will notice that when you import, you have the choice to either import to overwrite or import to merely edit. I'll go ahead and demonstrate. I'll choose File, Import. As you can see, we can choose that to allow creation of new objects or not. And if we, for example, if we're only making edits to existing objects, we would delete that or we would uncheck that. We can allow updating of objects if the objects already exist. Actually, in this case, I'd like to turn that off because all I'm trying to do is restore what was there before. I'm not really going to be updating anything. And normally we suggest you choose automatic check-in. That's just going to go ahead, and it's got a little leaner footprint on memory during the import. It just automates the check-in so you don't have to go in there and do that. And then finally, if you recall, when we define data references to PyPoints, we can specify that tag creation is set for those PyPoints. So let me show you an example if I haven't deleted it yet. If we look at our storage tank, yeah, here it is. Under storage tank, there is an option here called lab point, and that lab point was defined to have tag creation turned on. Now, only if tag creation is turned on for your data reference, only if that is the case, when we do an import, and if you've checked that we allow point creation, we will go ahead and create those points. I think I will go ahead and allow it to create an update. And I'll go ahead and allow it to create any points. Those points should already be there, but I'll just go ahead and specify this so I get a full restore. I'll go ahead and say OK. It's gone out. It's found everything that was exported and brought it back in. So if we take a look at this now, our enumeration sets are back. The templates that I deleted are back. All the elements that I deleted are now back as well. So that's an example of using our export and import. Now, one common gotcha when you're working with this is that if you've made any changes that are specific to your site for unit of measure, you've added your own units of measure, and you made use of those in your library or in your elements. Well, that's something that is not exported with the rest of the AF export that we just did. So what we would suggest you do, and the order in which you would do this, is you would export your unit of measure first, and import that first before you import your AF export, and then in that way any units of measure that AF import requires will be there already. So what we'd have to do is do a select unit of measure, choose File, and then Export, and you'll notice just with the naming convention here we're specifying that this is going to be for the unit of measure database. So that would be something. I'll go ahead and export my units of measure if there are any custom units of measure. In that way, if I go ahead and create a brand new database, here's a brand new database, or actually more to the point, if I'm moving this from one machine to another, on that second machine you may not find those units of measure available. So with this database here, database 35, if it's on a different machine, the first thing I would do, go into units of measure, do a file import, and then after I do that, go into the actual this new database and do a file import of the actual AF database structure.